So I've done a lot of reviews on wet and dry vacuums on my channel, and the one recurring comment I always get is a question about which one I would choose. So I figured I would do this review comparing the last 13 wet and dry vacuums that I reviewed and giving my thoughts on, well, essentially which one I would pick. Now, this video is not going to be a review of any of those individual products. As I said, I've reviewed them all individually on the channel. I have dedicated reviews for each one of them. So if you're interested in seeing more about any of those particular models, go back to my channel and search for that particular model and watch the dedicated review. But rather, I'm going to focus on sharing my thoughts on each one of those, what I think the pitfalls are in some of them, and essentially at the end of the day, which one I would choose. So let's get started, and I'm going to start you off with telling you what that lineup of those wet and dry vacuums are. The first one will be the Bissell CrossWave Edge, and then with Tineco, we have a bunch. We have the S6 Stretch, the S7 Pro, and the S7 FlashDry. Moving on to Roborock, we're going to have the Dyad Pro, the Flexi Lite, and the Flexi Pro. And then with Dreame, we have the H12 Pro, the H13 Pro, the H14, and the H14 Pro. And then we're going to have Narwal, the S20 Pro. And last but not least, a new contender that I'm very happy to add is the UWANT D100. Now, what I've done, and to save you guys the trouble of manually comparing each one, I created a very detailed table across multiple dimensions, which I'm going to show you. And these dimensions are going to be the capacity of the clean and the dirty water tank, the battery life, the different modes or the cleaning modes that these have, whether they have edge cleaning or not, whether they have brush cleaning or not, and then if they can dry the brush roll or not, how loud the drying process is, if they have an anti-hair tangle brush, if they have lay flat capabilities, that is if they are able to go at 180-degree lay flat to go under furniture, if they have assisted wheels, if they have a headlight, if they have a solution dispenser, and that's the tank that you fill with solution and it auto dispenses the right proportion alongside the water dispensing, and lastly, their weight. One thing I will not be talking about is the cleaning performance, and not because it's not important. Obviously, it's quite important, but because I think all of these did a fairly similar job in their cleaning tests. But if you are interested in seeing the cleaning performance of any of these models, then I really invite you to check the dedicated video. I did a lot of cleaning tests from dried out coffee stains to ketchup, milk, cereal, etc. So do check out the dedicated reviews. Now, before we get started, one last dimension I want to overlay on top of all these because it matters a lot is the price. I'm adding the price as the last dimension. Now, granted, this is the MSRP, so this is the retail suggested price. For some of these, you might find lower prices. They might be on promotion. There will be links in the description to check the price at the time you're watching this review. But as the price is always fluctuating, I'm sticking to the MSRP in terms of comparison. And by the way, these would be affiliate links. So if you do eventually decide to purchase any of these vacuums, I would really appreciate it if you would use those links, as I may earn some commission at no extra cost to you, but this will greatly help support the channel. And this is the table. Now, there's a lot of details over here, and I'm not going to go through these details. I will leave it on the screen, or feel free to pause and check it out in more detail. But rather, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of these different products, and I'm simply going to mention what I think the problem with them or why I would not choose them, ultimately leading to which model I would choose. Now, before we begin, just the legend for this table, I've highlighted in red everything I think that particular model does not do a good job at or does a poor job at. Inversely, I highlighted in green everything I think that particular model excels at or does really well in. And then everything in purple just does an okay job at. So let's get started. First off with the Bissell CrossWave Edge. And as you can see, there's a lot of red over here. And that's because I think the Bissell lags behind in a lot of categories. That for me is very difficult to recommend, especially given its price. It has the lowest runtime at 30 minutes. It has limited cleaning modes. It only has single edge cleaning, whereas most or all of the others have dual edge cleaning. It does not do any brush drying. It does not have lay flat capabilities. It does not have assisted wheels or even any traction by the brush roll, so it's difficult to move it forward. And because it doesn't have any of those assisted traction, it's really the only one of the bunch that it's noticeably more difficult to push it around, to maneuver, to move it around. And then there's no headlight and solution dispensing. It's slightly on the heavier side and it's not cheap. So the value for money here, in my opinion, is terrible. And really, this might be the only one out of the bunch I would not recommend at all, because there's a lot of better ones you can buy even cheaper than the Bissell CrossWave. Moving on to Tineco. Now, Tineco, they generally produce really good products, but I found they're a bit too expensive for what they offer. Starting off with the S6 Stretch, that's the only one that has lay flat capabilities, which is great, but it misses a few other things. Firstly, the drying cycle is a bit loud. It does not have an anti-hair tangle brush, and there's no automatic solution dispensing. Now, all of these are easy to overlook if the machine was priced reasonably, but at an MSRP of $600, I think it's way too expensive, and I'm way less forgiving in it missing these features. Moving on to the S7 Pro and the S7 FlashDry. The difference between the two is the S7 Pro does not have any brush drying, which is ridiculous at that price point of $700. There's no brush drying at all. Furthermore, there's no lay flat capabilities, which is ridiculous again at that price point. There's no automatic solution dispenser. There's no anti-hair tangle. Now you can pay a little bit more and get the S7 FlashDry, which adds heated brush drying, which is good, although it's a bit loud, but it still misses a lot of the things that I just said that the S7 Pro misses. And again, at almost $770 US, it's way too expensive for it to be lacking these features. Moving on to Roborock, the Dyad Pro is an older model that was released a few years back, and then more recently they released the Flexi Lite, Flexi Pro. I believe there's also a Flexi that is neither Lite nor Pro, somewhere in the middle between those two, but I haven't tested them. Let me start with the Dyad Pro. Generally, it's a good machine, but it's a bit outdated. It's a bit clunky and not too good looking. Also, the brush drying, they do advertise it as hot air brush drying, but in fact it is cold air, or rather room temperature air, which is unacceptable. And this means brush drying can take up to 3-4 hours, and still after 4 hours the brush roll is not completely dry. And I talked extensively about that part in the review of the Dyad Pro. Also, there's no lay flat capabilities, and there's no anti-hair tangle brush roll. So in absolute value, it's not a bad machine. But again, looking at the others in this table, it's hard to recommend it. Then we have the Flexi Lite and the Flexi Pro. These do have an updated design. I actually really like the way they look. It's very sleek. It's very modern. They also have a lot of new features, including lay flat capabilities. Now, the difference between the Flexi Pro and the Flexi Lite, first of all, the Pro has dual-sided edge cleaning, where the Lite has only single side. The Pro has assisted wheels, whereas the Lite does not. However, the brush does provide traction, so you still get assisted motion. They both do brush cleaning and brush drying, but the drying on the Pro takes only 30 minutes, whereas on the Lite it takes an hour, so it's a lower temperature. Also, the cleaning on the Pro is with hot water, whereas the cleaning on the Lite is with room temperature water. To be honest, I don't think there's a much difference in the cleaning aspect, but 30 minutes versus an hour and the drying cycle, that one is a significant difference because it's not very silent. Now, it's not too loud, not as loud as the Tineco's, but it's not silent either, especially if you have it in the same room. I'd rather it be done in 30 minutes over an hour. And then the Pro also has a headlight, whereas the Lite does not. Now, my problem with both of these is they have small capacity water tanks, both of them, even smaller on the Lite. Also, their cleaning mode. So for some reason, Roborock decided to omit the suction only mode. That is the mode that does not dispense water as you're cleaning. So there's only automatic mode, maximum mode, and eco mode. For some reason, they decided to remove the suction only mode, which was present on the predecessor on the Dyad Pro. So that's one of the issues that I have with the Roborock. There's also no anti-hair tangle brush, which is not too great. And there's no automatic solution dispensing, which again, the Dyad Pro had. All in all, they're not bad products, but at that price point, there are better ones coming along. Now let's get to the Dreame products, the H12 Pro, H13 Pro, H14, and H14 Pro. Each newer generation added something. So the H13 Pro added heated brush cleaning, which I have my reservations on how effective that is. And it also added assisted wheels, which were missing on the H12 Pro, and they added a headlight on the cleaning head. Then the H14 actually took a step back, and yes, this is not the Pro version. It's just the H14, but that as a machine did take a step back because then they removed a couple of the features that were present on the H13 Pro, like the assisted wheels, the headlight was removed, but we did gain something important, which is the lay flat capabilities. And that is, in my opinion, really important. With the H14, we also have a new addition, which is also interesting, which is in the brush drying. You have the option to do a 5-minute quick brush drying cycle or a more silent 1-hour cycle. Whereas with the H12 Pro and the H13, it was a 30-minute cycle that was relatively loud. So that part is good. And then the H14 Pro came, which on paper at least had the most complete set of features. So they added back the assisted wheels, the headlight. They also gave us an automatic solution dispenser, which is great to have. And we still had the fast and silent drying modes. And they added, and that's not on the table, Wi-Fi connectivity. So you have an app now. The importance of the app is, first of all, you can update the firmware of the machine in the future if Dreame releases new updates, but also you can configure some of the things. And some of the things you can configure is how much traction you want in the wheels. You can also manually start the drying cycle, whether it's the quick drying or the fast drying. And more importantly, and this thing was missing from the H12 Pro, 13 Pro, and the 14, the cleaning mode. So they only had 3 modes. There was automatic, ultra, and suction only mode. What is missing is the max mode or the turbo mode, which I think is quite important because I don't want to rely on the sensors in the machine to trigger the higher speed in auto mode. I do want the ability to manually kick the machine into max mode. Simply, if there's a stuck-on stain on the floor, the sensors are not going to be triggered because it's a dry, stuck-on mess. In that case, I do want the ability to manually increase the brush rotation speed, the water output, etc., which was missing on the 12 Pro, 13 Pro, and the 14. And with the 14 Pro, they now gave us custom mode, which allows us to create that custom mode, the 4th mode, which could be maximum mode. Now, if you look at the feature set, there's not a lot of red, there's a lot of green. So on paper, this seems like the perfect machine. In practice, it is not. My issue with the H14 Pro, and I talked extensively about that in the dedicated review, is that there's a lot of ridiculous design decisions, if I may be so bold. The machine had a lot of potential, but I think they missed the mark in a couple of areas. For example, they gave you the custom mode, and in that mode, you can manually set it to be the maximum mode, or you can set it to be the quiet mode, which is also important for some people if you want to be quiet at night when you are using the vacuum cleaner. But they only gave us the option to have one set at a time, which means you had to choose which one you wanted, and you cannot cycle through both modes. Now, granted, you can if you wanted to get the quiet mode, but then you have to get your phone, open the app, change the settings. So there's a lot of clicks and steps involved before you can get to that mode, whereas they could have just let us cycle through all the available modes from the machine itself. So that's one thing. The other and more important thing, in my opinion, is there's no way to start the brush drying process without starting the brush cleaning process from the machine itself. So that was my problem with the predecessors as well. The only way you can dry your brush roll is if you clean it first, which is going to take a couple of minutes of loud sounds and unnecessarily cleaning the brush roll. Imagine you just sucked water off of the floor. The brush is not dirty per se. You don't really need to clean it. I just want to dry it. With all the other machines, you can press and hold the cleaning button or the mode button or whatever button and just start the drying process. For some reason, with the Dreamies, you cannot simply press and hold to start the drying process. Now with the 14 Pro, you technically can, but only through the app. So again, you need to fetch your phone, open the app, go through a bunch of different steps and clicks to get to the brush drying. Not only that, you cannot easily cycle between the fast drying or the silent drying. Again, you need to go into the settings and reconfigure what the drying mode is before you can actually launch it, which is ridiculous. They could have done a much better job in a much easier and more user-friendly way where you can trigger both, let's say, silent and fast drying with one click on the app and then press and hold a button on the machine itself and give me the option to actually start it without having to open the app. And lastly, the machine is on the heavier side of things, and I found the head does not pivot as much as it does with the other machines. Now, all of these negative points could be forgiven if it wasn't for the price. Look at the price of this thing at $700. It's ridiculous, and I'm way less forgiving at that price point. I do expect it to be much better. And this is where we get to the Narwal S20, which in my opinion is the best one so far in terms of price and a completeness of features. So everything I hated about the H14 Pro, the Narwal S20 not only has that, but actually does a fantastic job at it. Starting off with runtime, it has the highest of all the bunch. In terms of the cleaning modes, it also has the highest number of different cleaning modes at 5 different cleaning modes. So in addition to the standard ones that we see, the automatic mode, the quiet mode, the suction only mode, and the max mode, it adds another 5th mode, which is called Max Enhancement, and you trigger that manually by pressing this trigger button on the handle, and this gives you 5 times more cleaning power, more solution dispensed, and more water for these stubborn stains, and this is wonderful. The screen also looks gorgeous. I love the screen. It's very informative. It's animated. It gives you a lot of details. It tells you what the machine is actually doing. There's a countdown timer when you're doing the drying cycle or the cleaning cycle, so you know exactly how much time is left in that process. The brush roll drying, which for me is an important thing because I live in a humid area, and air drying the brush roll is not really an option for me. It has the best brush drying that I've seen for 2 reasons. One, it is the quietest. I measured that at 39 decibels, and that's because it uses a different approach. Instead of blowing hot air, it actually has a heated plate, and the brush is just rotating against that heated plate, so it makes less noise. But also, it's the only one that has smart brush drying. So the cycle normally runs for 30 minutes, but after that 30 minutes, there are sensors that detect if the brush roll is still wet or not. And if it is, it dynamically adjusts the time. So it extends the time dynamically until the brush roll is actually dry. And that can range anywhere between 30 minutes to 80 minutes, depending on your ambient temperature, your humidity level, and how wet the brush roll is, which is fantastic. It's the only one that does that. The anti-hair tangler brush is one of the best that I've seen again and tested. It did a fantastic job. I did a stress test with pink hair, and there was absolutely none tangled on the brush roll. It does lay flat, and it's one of the very few ones that has a solution dispenser, an automatic solution dispenser, which also has an indicator to tell you if the tank is empty, which is not always found on the competitors. And lastly, it is the lightest of the bunch as well, and it's extremely lightweight and very easy to maneuver, and the cleaning head pivots significantly. So all in all, it is the best of the bunch in terms of the features and how well it does in each of these categories. And the best part, it's not even the most expensive one. So the retail price is $4.99. Again, you can find it cheaper. And matter of fact, there is a coupon that I have right now. It knocks off $100 US or $150 Canadian off of this price, which makes it a fantastic bargain. So to be honest, the two that have the most features are the H14 Pro from Dreame and the S20 Pro. But in my mind, there's absolutely no competition. The Dreame base price is $200 more expensive than the Narwal. Even if it was the other way around, even if the Narwal was $200 more expensive than Dreame, I still would have recommended the Narwal because it is that much better than the Dreame, despite having the same features, shall I say. But then when you see that the Narwal is in fact $200 cheaper than the Dreame H14 Pro, it's a no-brainer. That is clear in my mind, the best one you can buy. Now, the last contender I want to add, and that really was a late entrant because I only recently received the UWANT D100, and to be honest, it wasn't a brand I had heard of, and I only recently released that review, but that blew my mind because in terms of value for money, it is by far the best wet and dry vacuum you can get. And that's because at its price point, the amount of features it has is ridiculous. And it does a good job at them. Now, it only recently launched in the EU a couple of days ago. It's still not launched in the US, but I have been told by UWANT that it is set to launch in the US sometime around January 2025. I still don't have confirmation on the exact price, but I was told it will be somewhere around $300, could be a little bit less than $300 as well. And if you look across the board over here, that is the cheapest one of the bunch. It barely has any red and has a lot of green. This is ridiculous. Now look at the list of features here, and there's almost everything you might want from a wet and dry vacuum cleaner. It has the 3 most important modes in my opinion: automatic mode, maximum mode, and suction only. Whereas the Roborock misses the suction only mode, which is an important mode. The Dreames miss the maximum mode, which again is an important mode. So it has the 3 most important modes. It has brush drying at 60 degrees, which is great. And it's actually fairly silent at around 42 decibels. And it gets the brush roll almost entirely dry in about an hour. It has anti-hurt angle capabilities. It does lay flat, and it has a bunch of innovative and unique features. For example, it has a push-in base, which is the first one I've seen with a push-in base. And the way it works, instead of actually having to lift the machine to place it on the base for charging, and you know, sometimes you miss the contacts, you don't get a good fit, and you have to do it multiple times. This one, you just park it like you park a car. You just roll the machine into the base and then lock the handle, and it's just gonna start charging. Another unique feature, you can unclick the handle and it pivots, which makes cleaning easier, as you can see, which again, I haven't seen on any of the other machines. The actual motor is waterproof and washable, which again, I haven't seen on any of the machines, so you can hose it down with water if you wanted to. It's extremely lightweight at 4.13 kilograms. The head pivots really well, and it's very easy to move around despite not having actual assisted wheels, but there's a lot of traction you get from the rotating brush roll. Matter of fact, if you leave it on the floor, it's just gonna move itself forward. So that, coupled with the fact that it's extremely lightweight, makes it a breeze to move around. Now, it does have a lower than average runtime at 35 minutes. It also doesn't have an automatic solution dispenser, but most of these over here don't. But still, looking at the price point and the completeness of the features, I think this could be the best value for money wet and dry vacuum you can buy. So to conclude, if you're looking for the most features, the absolute best wet and dry vacuum cleaner, and you're willing to pay the money for it, I would definitely recommend the Narwal S20 Pro. But if you're looking for the best value for money wet and dry vacuum cleaner, no bells and whistles, just really good performance and a rich feature set, then I would definitely recommend the UWANT D100. Now, the last thing I want to say, depending on where you are, the Narwal or the UWANT might not be available. So for the UWANT, again, if you're in the US, you might have to wait a bit until it's released. And then if you're in Europe, the Narwal, as of now, is not also being sold. The closest to Narwal, if you're in Europe and want all of these features, is the Dreame H14 Pro. On paper, they have almost the same features. But as I said, in practice, the H14 Pro has some questionable design decisions. If you're in Europe and still want the most features in a wet and dry vacuum cleaner, and you're willing to overlook the shortcomings of the H14 Pro, then I guess it could be a second best option. But still, I have a hard time recommending it at that price point. And to be honest, even if you're looking for the absolute best wet and dry vacuum cleaner, the most features in a wet and dry, there's no way I can justify it costing 2 to 3 times more than the UWANT, which does almost everything the Dreame does. You'll be missing the automatic solution dispensing and quiet mode, but beyond that, is that worth paying 2 to 3 times more? Honestly, I don't think so, but you know best what works most for your use cases. So that's it for me. I hope this was useful in helping you possibly decide on which wet and dry vacuum cleaner works most for your use cases. If you have any questions or thoughts or comments, feel free to drop them in the comment section. Again, I'll put product links in the description. If you do decide to buy any of them, I would really appreciate if you go through the links. The commission I may earn at absolutely no cost to you will greatly help support the channel. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel, as this encourages me to continue producing content. Until next time, cheers.